the real dangerous people, like the folks that are unstoppable and can get anything done, are the folks that accept both sides of themselves. Befriending the side of you that you'd rather it not be there. It's a great discipline.
And
Because most people don't accept it and they live in shame about it. It just steals their energy and it makes them a performer and like makes them live a persona that's very fragile. And so when someone brings them feedback, they can't hear it. They won't hear it, and they'll justify it, and they lose credibility with their team.
we have got a treat for you, boys and girls, because we have Adrian Koehler on today's podcast, and he's got a ton of great stories. Adrian, before we get started, I like to throw my guests an off-the-wall question or comment before we get started, just to keep you on your toes. You ready for this?
I'm ready, man.
All right. So I know you're an executive coach. You work with leaders from entrepreneurs all the way up to Fortune 500 execs.
Yep.
Also happen to know, thanks to my crack leader research team, that you are also a coach for prison inmates.
Yep.
So I want to understand, tell me a little bit about the differences between coaching the two, which may be obvious, but I also want to know, tell me about some similarities that we wouldn't have thought of that would be pretty unique.
Sure. Well, first off, thanks for having me on. Always honored to have a great conversation. So let's see. There are much more similarities than there are differences. That's for sure. Why is that? I mean, most of the guys that we worked with in prison, most of them are murderers. Almost all of them. We've worked with some juveniles that hadn't killed anybody, but everybody we worked with in the adult population were all murderers. Most of them were involved in gang life. Most of them, essentially, high-end entrepreneurs. They ran, all dark, the dark economy, but very brilliant. All manage with power and influence and with their words, and then with the willingness to take severe action. So, I mean, there's not a big difference between what they had to do on the street to make it work. I mean, they're tougher than most of them. I mean, they became tougher than most of my entrepreneurs did, in the sense that, they had some rigidity that they had to keep going. But most of the entrepreneurs as well, they have a tough, exterior, but now there's such a pressure, and I think an expectation, which I think it's good to be real, to be human as a leader, that most of my clients are in that flux on how they get more honest with themselves and with their teams. And so those guys, man, you gotta keep your weaknesses really close to your vest. And there's a good move in culture where people are actually more real, like conversations we're having. So
Wow. I like what you said. First of all, I've always thought that folks in prison or on the streets or anything that you're trying to make money, those are some of the best entrepreneurs, because they've got to figure it out, how to make money and deliver some sort of service and customer service and all that.
And and the complexity of the illegality. I mean, there's just so many more things to consider if you're gonna pull it off without anybody finding out. It's high end efficiency and effectiveness, really.
What's funny about what you just said is there's probably a lot of legitimate businesses that have to worry about being found out and doing the right.
Yes.
Oh, that's
for
funny.
Sure.
Well, as you can tell, my guest today is Adrian Koehler. He is now an executive coach with Take New Ground. He's also one of the co-hosts of the podcast Naked Leadership, and he's self-described no bullshit coach for restless and relentless founders, which I want to dive into for sure.
Sure.
He's got a long career in coaching and training, but before that, he was a director with Mosaic, which was a faith-based community of over 3,000 people where he focused on social justice. He started his career with 7.5 years as a critical care nurse, people fighting for their lives from all over the globe, including places like Haiti, India, and Pakistan. And his schooling was from the Gateway Seminary. So I can't wait to dive into some of these things today. Adrian, thank you so much for joining me.
Kurt, thanks for having me, man.
Well, I definitely want to dive into some of your background. But before we do, let's start with who you are, what you're doing today. I've got a couple of key fun things from my as I said, research team. But tell me a little bit about what you're doing with Take New Ground. It sounds like a really fascinating way to coach and train.
It's a great group, so I co-founded Take New Ground with my business partner, Dan Tacchini, and Dan's who's one of a kind individual. Like he's been in this leadership coaching, like quote unquote, transformational leadership space for 30 years. He's been at it. And like when he started his first company, it was literally called the coaching company. So like it was, he was early in this professional coaching world. And so he's the best. He's like Mozart. So as soon as I met Dan, I immediately connected with him, immediately hired him to do the work in prison. Actually, he's who helped generate that work. There's a long story there that I won't go into now. So, but he and I are co-founders. Then we have a big growing group of people that are on board. We've found that I guess a lot of people have this complaint that it's like hard to go find good talent. I, and I don't usually buy that when people tell me that. It's for us though, the filter is really fine on, because there's lots of people that are coaches, quote unquote. But as you alluded to, we're the no bullshit folks. And we are very committed to riding this line between, being an advocate for people and being for people and championing them and believing in them, and also not pulling any punches. Like we're going to talk about it as we see it, and it will occur to you as probably rude, and crass maybe, or and provocative, because it's also that. So we're unapologetic about that, because most adults don't change unless they must. And so, you usually have to get in somebody's face pretty good. If you listen into some team meetings, if I'm talking about somebody, you'll hear me say, I got to take a 2x4 to this guy. We say stuff like that. Why is that? Because everybody we work with, very smart, very ambitious, are used to being the smartest person in the room, have tons of swagger that is either on the verge of or directly in the realm of arrogance. And they hire us because we tell them the truth. Now, we don't know the truth, but we're going to point it out. I warn them all that it's what's running your organization is the conversations that's under the table, not the ones that are on the table that are very convenient. It's the conversations under the table, the ones that even you, rock star, aren't getting close to. So I warn them all. I say the game we're playing is how much truth can you tell and how much courage can you muster? And those are two realms of conversation, if you will, that most people aren't challenging them on, because they're the authority and they're the entrepreneur, they're the gutsy one. So, most of them, they get away with a bunch. I'll just say it that way. When I'm in an initial conversation with them, before I sign them up to be a client, like we have a call, right? An hour-long call where we're just exploring. And it's usually around 12 minutes in, I've found 12, 15 minutes in, I'm going to challenge them on something. And they don't know that yet. And we just met. And so we've done all the cordialities, and they start saying something. And I notice some, at least my bullshit meter goes off, or just some inauthentic something, or some, I don't know, old tape, if you will, something they say that I know they don't really mean. And I'll say, hey, all right, we've known each other, 12 minutes now. Can I take a risk with you? Can I point something out? And of course, they always say yes. And then I'll say something quite absurd that a stranger would never say to somebody. And that's a test, just to see, hey, are you in this? Are you looking for somebody else to pad your ego? Or are you looking for somebody that's going to fight for you? Because if I believe in you at the level I believe in you, I actually can't believe you. That's the distinction. Like, I'm going to have to challenge even your view of yourself, either your glorious view of yourself or all your shame bullshit conversation. You have to challenge both of those. So that's how we roll. I was just on the conversation right before we started today with a guy that wouldn't be offended me saying his name, a guy named Josh Geigel. He was early, built the engine at SpaceX, and then he went out and started Virgin Hyperloop. So created the first Hyperloop ever in human history, and he rode in it, a Branson company. And then he got out of that, and he's starting a new AI-driven defense company. World-class physicist, obviously brilliant. And we're planning his 2-day offsite. He's very committed to the culture of this team, and he's got 9 people now, and they're early funded and that kind of thing. So I love so we just got off talking about, okay, we've got this offsite coming up at the end of February. Let's talk about outcomes. What do you want to get done? And for this one, it's all around culture. It's all around the conversation that people are, naturally, like the ethos that they are, and what he's committed to as an organization. And if you do that, honestly, you never know what's going to happen in a room. Like as a leader, if you take a big, mighty stand, like this is the future I'm committed to, and this is what's required if you're going to play ball on my team. If you take that kind of stand, then people might, the team might go from 9 to 7, might go. I mean, who knows? I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it will naturally generate conflict, and that's good because culture is. Dan just said this on the call. Like culture is where we go under conflict. So a lot of our work is around generating trust, generating alignment, generating camaraderie on a team, and working through issues to get the interpersonal issues out of the way so we can actually get the job done. That's a
I,
really long answer, but those are the themes about what we're about.
I love it. I love the last part about making sure you've got some good discord to get to a better answer, but you've got
Right
trust
on.
among the team. But the other things, back to the beginning part that I really wanted to jump on was you sound like you want to tell people what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. And
Right on.
sometimes that's challenging them on their greatness, and sometimes it's challenging them on their whatever their inferiority complexes are.
Right
The other
on.
thing I heard was you tell them pretty much early on in your relationship, so they know they're getting the no bullshit coach early on, and
Yeah.
they've got to be strong enough to be able to handle that, and that's just part of your deal. You want to be direct.
Right. Yeah. It's a differentiator for us for sure. Because lots of coaches, put that in quote, coaches out there, I mean, they're great people and they're really just encouragers. And hey, let me teach you these 5 things about how to do the blah, blah, blah. Or let me take you through this assessment so you can have new labels, which is fine. Obviously, I'm being a little condescending because I don't, if you looked on our website, it would say most coaching is bullshit. Most, assessments are bullshit. Most training's bullshit. So anyway, if you picked up my condescension, you're paying attention. But that's what folks like, and that's what they want. But it's not, to your point, what they need.
Yeah. I like to say you can't sling a dead cat without hitting a coach these days. So you acknowledge that.
That's funny. That's
Hey,
funny. Yeah.
look,
When I
well, you
come on
can.
a podcast, most people say we have a lot of coaches that want to be on our podcast, and we don't let any of them on. But you're weird enough, we'll let you do it. So
I like it.
I'm
It's
with you.
part of the deal. Now, one thing I want to touch on that's related to what you just talked about is something I saw on your Instagram, which was
Yeah.
a post that said something along the lines of successful people are dysfunctional.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that, what that means.
Yeah. Well, you know, if you're going to be successful, you pretty much, it's guaranteed you're going to have to be imbalanced to be successful, at least imbalanced at times. And you've got a different set of priorities than most people, because most people are just out to kind of have a predictable standard experience with acceptable outcomes. So I've got the job that makes it just enough money, and I've got enough time off, and I've got enough work-life balance, quote unquote, and that's what most people want, is this kind of fineness. But if you're going to be really successful, you have to throw all those cultural rules out the window. And when I say dysfunctional, I really mean dysfunctional in the eyes of most people, of the herd. Like the herd says, okay, this is what's good, and we'll even moralize it. We'll say it's healthy. It's healthy to do these types of things. But really successful people have just decided they're going to play by their own rules. For the most part, not everybody's like that, but for the most part, they're going to play by their own rules. They're going to be seen as dysfunctional. And at least for me, I'm dysfunctional. Like there's parts of my life, especially in different seasons of my life, that aren't working. And it's a part of caring about the big picture and caring about my own legacy. It's not always going to be, I'm not always going to be eating the way I want to be eating and sleeping the way I'm going to be sleeping, and having the types of relationships I want to have. Sometimes you just go through seasons where, hey, this is the focus, and it's whatever it takes to get there. And I'm done doing the perfectionistic BS, where it's like everything's got to be just right. And you live kind of to live a, Instagram reel, no, or highlight reel. No, no, no. I'm just committed to this thing. So it's not going to be perfect. I'm done with that. It's not going to look good all the time. And if you got, behind the scenes, you'd see it's sloppy. And that's that's usually what's necessary. But highly successful people have a really keen sense on the outcome, and so the means is going to be sloppier, and just doesn't work for a lot of people either. You will naturally offend those. If you're committed to excellence, you're going to offend the folks that are committed to mediocrity, and they'll call it dysfunction. Meanwhile, you're hitting your goals and making all the money you want to make and living the life you want to live.
I can promise you, you're inspiring some people. I want to tell the world out there that if you're normal, well, let's say this again. I want to inspire the people out there. If people tell you you're dysfunctional, you're a whack job, you're a little bit out there, that's probably
Yes.
pretty normal for most
Oh yeah.
successful people. So live it, embrace it, and know that you're not alone.
Yeah, I just saw Tom Bilyeu. I don't know if you know Tom. I don't know him personally, but he started Quest Nutrition, sold it for $1 billion. Anyway, he just said something. He did a whole reel on it, which is just like, what did he say? He said it's okay to be obsessed. Most people are not obsessed with something. They want kind of the middle of the road. They want, they have an aversion towards being seen as a crazy person. And I just want to own it more and more. I'm 43 now, and I just want to be, myself, whatever that is. And that's a moving target from day to day, but I just want to be more myself. And there's certain things I'm obsessed with. There's certain things I'm not obsessed with that other people are. So, I just, if you give people permission to be themselves, that's a fun game. That's a really fun game.
You're so much a better person if you're your authentic self and showing up that
Right
way
on.
and not trying to be who you're not. And I love that's a big part of this podcast is letting
Right
people
on.
know that it's okay to be themselves and don't be ashamed of it. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. Love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Unapologetic has been I guess a word in my mind, or the theme in my mind over the last year, probably. But that, I don't know, for me, I mean, talking a little bit about my history, I was a pastor for several years, and it's a high platform, and there's obviously moral aspects to it as well. And there's like, you're kind of iconic in whatever community you're in, and people look up to you, and things have got to look and feel a certain way, which I didn't like, but it's kind of part of the job. And but so anyways, I've got the t-shirts. What I'm saying is, where you kind of people please, especially at a mass level, you kind of become what you think is wanted or needed, or you become what the community needs, and you end up shutting off parts of yourself, and you can't run from that despair. That's there. Like, that'll hang out with you when you're not being yourself. You'll be haunted by that until you find a way to really reconcile that, or for me, find an environment in which I can really be, quote unquote, fully myself. And luckily, I'm not luckily, good for me, I'm in that environment. I get to be as intense as I want to be, and be as loving as I want to be, and be as, like, I've always loved the deep end, and I'm way too, quote unquote, serious for a lot of people, which is totally cool. We're just not that close of friends. You don't like talking about the real shit? No big deal. We can go back to talking about the Dodgers. That's cool. And I'll listen and whatever. I don't really have any opinions about the Dodgers, nor do I pay close attention, but I can hang. That's fine. But we're not going to be close. I'm only going to run with people that want to get to the core issues in life. And for a lot of people, that's too much. And the older I get, the more I'm okay. I think it actually I remember Seth Godin used to say this thing where, like, if people don't like your product, then it's just not for them. No big deal.
Yep. And you're the product. I'm imagining going to a party, and I know people that love to go to a party and meet 100 people, and they'll dance, and they'll just talk to 100 people, really tertiary and surface level conversations. I like to find one person, sit on the couch on the side, and just have a deep conversation most of the evening, and that just fuels me. Or maybe playing pickleball or basketball all night. That's the other thing I can do.
Right on. That's the way you are. You find yourself at a party and you're like, might talk to one person for an hour and a half.
Exactly.
That's great. I love that too.
Hey, speaking of pickleball or basketball, I saw on Instagram that you played dodgeball. You got to tell me more about that.
Yeah. Well, dodgeball. I've played. I grew up small town America in Illinois. We played a lot of sports. My I was the youngest of two boys. My brother's 3 years older than me, and he was a hoss, we would have called him in Southern Illinois. Big dude, set every record. So I was always the scrappy youngster. My dad coached every team. He just this week I got a phone call from my dad. He just got inducted into the Hall of Fame at my high school just because of the legacy that he's left as a coach.
Nice. Please don't tell me it was dodgeball coach.
Not a dodgeball coach, but I love playing dodgeball. I love playing every sport. I played football in college, but played, baseball and coach my son's baseball team now and coach his football team. And anyway, love sports. Dodgeball is a blast, especially because you could tell really easily who comes from an athletic background, who doesn't. And if you come from an athletic background, as I do, and I've thrown a lot of balls in my day, I can throw the ball really hard. It's a lot of fun. You can pick some people off. And anyway, it wouldn't look good to some people, but man, it's a lot of fun.
It's funny you say that because there's some people who grew up playing baseball or football that can throw the ball. I mean, let's just be honest. And dads, teach your freaking boys how to throw the ball. Everybody needs
That's right.
Even girls too need to know how to throw the ball. But I would have, because I have 3 boys myself, and we played a lot. They played a lot of dodgeball, and I would tell some boys, "You're a dodger. You just sit in the back and dodge, and then hand the ball to the throwers, right?
That's right. Just you get good at catching, because if you catch, it's good. You bring your teammate back in. Yes, I know
exactly. Know your role.
I know. Yes, it was always that way. Like, when they blow the whistle, you got to run out and get the balls. And it's like, I can tend, whatever. I'm a team player, so I want people to have a good experience as well. But it's like, if I don't have a ball in my hand, we're losing. Like, I need to have a ball in my hand and need to be a sniper from the back row and fight the temptation to hit people in the face. I have to fight that temptation. It just is so much fun. But I was QB in high school.
People are begged to be hit in the face.
Yeah, especially that one guy with the headband. You want to hit that guy early because he's really good among the. Oh, I'm going to edit myself. Anyway, so there's certain people that you like hitting, and you just pick them out early. So anyway, I love playing dodgeball. I've played rec league dodgeball here a lot. Rec league kickball too. I'm a sucker for any kind of competition.
Let's go. I'm the same way. I love it. Hey, in your latest podcast, it was titled something that really got me thinking, and I listened to the show, but I want to hear your perspective. It's titled Hug the Cactus.
Yeah.
And this is again on the Naked Leadership Podcast. Tell me what Hug the Cactus means.
Yeah. Well, it's a metaphor that comes from who were called the Desert Fathers, like early Christian leaders like Thomas Aquinas, for example. Hug the Cactus for us. All right, let's see. Let me do a couple things first. If we're going to talk about generating the future you want, you better get really clear on what you're contributing to and what you've and get some high level of ownership of what current reality is. So I have a couple assertions. I have lots of assertions, but in this regard, I tell people, I invite them to believe this because I believe this, and I think it generates the most amount of power for us, is that whatever's happening in our life right now, we either created it or we allowed it. Like, there's no wiggle room. It's not like stuff happens. Yes, of course, there's weird things that happen to us and blah, blah, blah. But if you want to generate the biggest future possible for you, you better settle in to a deep sense of personal responsibility. Actually what generates the most amount of power, like internal power. I don't mean like authority. It does that as well. But I mean vitality, and I mean creativity. If you want to do all that, you better get a clean sense of your personal responsibility. So if it's true that I've either created or allowed whatever I have right now, then if I take a look at the things that are here that I'm complaining that are here, then I have to look at how I've contributed to those things. And that's going to be looking at the unfriendly, I'm thinking, sides of ourselves. Like, what's our dark side? Like, what about Adrian? Are like, what's the criminal intent? Since we worked with guys in prison all the time, we'll always say, in training rooms, we're all criminals, and some of us are just more arrestable than others. So what we mean by that, Jung was obviously huge on this, is that we've got a shadow self. We've got sides to ourselves that we're not proud of, that we sometimes can't shake, and don't want anybody else to know about, and might live in a shame conversation about. Those are just our dark side. So when we say hug the cactus, we mean to be willing to get real about the sides of ourselves that aren't a great contribution, that actually might be the opposite of that. And what is that? And can you hug it? Like, can you befriend your own criminality? Like parts of you that wants to, when you're in front of a team, every CEO knows this, there are conversations that need to happen in the room and you're just too chicken to have it. Or there's like conflict that needs to happen and you're really busy being the nice guy about it. It's like, oh, you know what? He's going through a hard time. She's going through a hard time. Let me just avoid that. Or it can get worse than that, right? Where people are actually doing some really heinous things. And can you, instead of justifying the dark side, can you hug it? Can you befriend it? Because most things are, I mean, we tell people all the time, you're not going to change, but you can transform, which is to reamalgamate. Like I can use those bad, quote unquote, bad things and use them for my advantage. Because I have lied plenty in my life. So when someone else is lying, I can see it early. And actually, I have compassion for them as well, because when I was lying about, I'm thinking about different seasons of my life when I was kind of fraudulent in my behavior. And I can actually, I'm not easily offended. So I can see they're lying and I'd be like, hey, man, let's talk about this. Like, no judgment about it, but I notice a difference between what you're saying and what you're doing. I know you know the difference between it. Can we talk about it? And most people are going to be really busy trying to look good, which is one of those survival needs: look good, feel good, be right, be in control. Most of us, because of the ego, whatever, however people talk about that, they don't want to illuminate the dark side for fear that their dark side is who they are. We're always a mix of both, right? We're both sinner and saint, or whatever metaphor you want to use. And the more the real dangerous people, like the folks that are unstoppable and can get anything done, are the folks that accept both sides of themselves. So hugging the cactus is essentially befriending the side of you that you'd rather it not be there. It's a great discipline.
And
Because most people don't accept it and they live in shame about it. It just steals their energy and it makes them a performer and like makes them live a persona that's very fragile. And so when someone brings them feedback, they can't hear it. They won't hear it, and they'll justify it, and they lose credibility with their team. But if they can own their shit quickly with their team, it's like, hey, I feel like, what would be a judgment? I feel like, there's conflict on the team that you're not talking about. And if someone can say, you're exactly right, I've just been a coward, I need some help in this area, what do you think we should do? You win credibility. You win. Everybody gets close to a leader that's that honest. But if they blame it on circumstances, like most people, they blame it on the other person, like most people, then they lose credibility. So it's a strategy for connection, trust, and vitality.
wow, Adrian, that's deep stuff. Getting comfortable with your dark side, really understanding that your dark side exists and that your dark side's not a bad side. It's just the side that you really don't want to admit. But the way
Yeah.
I've heard this is that some people, or all of us, the things that we get frustrated about in other people are things that we get frustrated in about ourselves. So we're like looking
Right
into
on.
a mirror. So it's really deep thinking there. I appreciate that.
You got it, man. Yeah, it's a projection. It's a projection. Yeah, whatever's pissing me off about them, it's probably that version of myself that I haven't put my arms around and accepted. But if I accept it over here first, and then when it shows up over there, I can actually access it faster. That's the beauty, is if you accept it over here, I can actually get close to that person and maybe turn them, to the good. I know that if most people don't talk about it, or they just judge it silently, and they start to slowly plan to fire that person instead of like having that conversation early when it's a 2 out of 10 conflict. Instead, they wait until it's a 9 out of 10, which serves them, because then they don't have to actually take a courageous action. Now they like have to fire them, instead of like, what, you knew about it so long ago, man. Let's talk about how much time, energy, resources you wasted on your cowardice.
And I got to admit that many times I've not had that conversation, and it's gotten, I've stewed and let it, eat me up, and ultimately make the decision to fire him.
Right on.
But and there have been times where I've had that conversation early, and our relationship maybe even started with a conflict, seem to be some of the best and longest standing relationships.
Right on.
Tell me that I'm an asshole early on in our relationship, and I'm gonna trust and respect you.
Yes. Oh man, I love it. I love it when people are like that. When people are straight up, I don't. Let me say something that'd be like, anyway. as I'm just thinking this, I'm thinking this would be weird to say out loud, but I know I'm talented. I know I'm talented. I'm not talented on accident. I part of it was probably God given, or I, it was indoctrinated in me because I have two great parents that are both school teachers, salt of the earth type folks, and I know I'm talented, but I don't, I'm nowhere near where I want to be when I'm 53 versus when I'm 43. So the people that I want to roll with are those that are going to like not be impressed by me. They're actually going to push me to think clearer, to be more bold, to really be myself. And I've got, just like anybody, I've got some reluctance to that. Like that. There's to stick your neck out and really be fully expressed. That's a pretty vulnerable choice. Um, and I want to be around people that look me in the eye and say, "Hey, man, that's good for most people, but not for you. You got to step it up." I
Love it.
love people like that.
Well, hey, I want to shift gears and talk about two things. One, I want to ask you how the hell you went from seminary to critical care nurse to now badass executive coach. And then separately, I want to ask you what your unlocking move might be. And maybe there's some relation there too. So tell me your story a bit.
Yeah, I'll be brief on it. You can double click on whatever you want. So I actually started as a nurse. I was in college, was a pre-med guy in college. Didn't know really wanted to, I mean, asking a teenager what they want to be when they grow up, I think is an odd question. Because it mostly means, like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And maybe some people have had enough experience where they have gone out and seen it and, have enough objective data where they can really answer that. But I went on to college and I just was going to go play ball. And I knew I was good at science, because and I'd love that. And I'd taken every science class I could take. And I remember a lot of stuff. And I'm fascinated by, functions in the human body and that kind of thing. So I was like a pre-med guy. I realized early I don't want to be a doctor. I didn't want to like do all the school and all that. But also, in the medical profession, you're really at a distance, right? You're studying data and making decisions and following protocol. For me, that's not very creative. And I'm not that much of a data guy. I'm not that much of a kind of big picture. I actually like hand to hand. I like close. I like starting with humans first. So serendipitously, I guess my roommate in college freshman year, his dad was a nurse and his dad ran the ER in Gary, Indiana. So tough environment. A lot of crazy shit going down. I thought that's pretty adventurous. So like, I could go get a nursing major, not knowing I'd never known a nurse. Most nurses that you meet, their mom or their grandma or their aunt was a nurse or something. I didn't have any of that kind of experience, but I knew I liked it, and I knew I could do it. And at that point, job security. So my parents were really happy. But anyway, got out with a nursing degree, and moved to Chicago because I was dating a girl in Chicago, and worked at, of all the places I interviewed and got all these offers, I worked in the Children's Hospital in Chicago. And very interesting, like fascinating environment, because when a kid's sick, it's unique because you're helping serve the kid essentially by distracting them, helping them kind of get out of the horror of what's going on, because they don't understand. They don't have really a concept of that. But you're also educating a mom and a dad, which is usually very dramatic and challenging for them. And anyway, worked there, loved it, was a utility player, worked all over the hospital, and loved that. So I got really good at coming onto a floor of people I didn't know, coming into I didn't know, I wasn't an expert at any of these disease processes, but each floor had a different set of diagnoses. Like there's a neuro floor and a cardiac floor and a surgical floor, and it was broken up like that. So I had to get really good at like having about 75% of the information, but needing to show up like I knew 100%. So had to fake it till I make it or whatever. And needed to become really good at reading people, because I'd show up. I needed a lot because now literally the kids' lives were in my hands, and I just needed to know where stuff was, who I called, who I could lean on. And so I had to get really good at seeing who are the really smart people and who are the really helpful people. And hopefully those are the same people. But most of the time they're not. So learning how to maneuver my way through different like foreign power structures, and listening really well, and cueing on who's got the authority in this environment, had to become really good at that, and I loved it. Out of that, I would have faith background, obviously, and caught wind of a guy named Erwin McManus. I was actually with a team in India doing philanthropic work, and somebody gave me a talk, like a TED talk these days, or like is a sermon of this guy that was talking about the kind of the narrative, if you will, of Christianity in a way that I'd never heard before. I think most religious people are pretty boring. I think most people don't believe what they're actually saying and don't actually walk it out in a way that matters to them or to other people. This guy, though, he played a different song, and I thought, oh my gosh, okay, because I was always looking for mentors. For whatever reason, for myself, I thought, I don't know what I want to do, but I do know who I want to be. So when I find people I'm attracted to who they are and how they are in the world, I want to go be near them. So it's kind of an old school apprentice model type thing. I wasn't like building a career. I was building a network of human beings that was aspirational. So long story short, heard this sermon, moved out to Los Angeles because that guy, Irwin, had written lots of books. And I came back from that trip, read all of his books, and he'd started this community out here called Mosaic. Mosaic was ragtag. When I came here, we were about 2,000 people. We were meeting in nightclubs and high school gyms, and very flat organization, very pop-up, type organization. It wasn't based on a building. It was based on a people, which I thought was great. And I came out and I was an intern, and I did whatever it took. Right. So I worked a lot with college kids, um, and ended up there's a theme of service in my background, where I liked advocating for people and helping people thrive, and definitely liked inviting other people into those experiences, because I know when people get outside themselves, their life changes. Right. It's like, oh my gosh, once you sacrifice, I mean, this is probably a principle in life, but when sacrificing for someone else is the best move, just because you get to recalculate who you are and you get to see the difference you're making in their life. And all of a sudden you become new, even to yourself, which is beautiful. So they asked after the internship and this 21-month program called the Protege program, where I went and got a master's in theology and all that you mentioned. They said, hey, would you stay? Because I was going to go move to Africa and help this guy plant churches and do a bunch of fun stuff, which I just thought was the fun next adventure. But they said, would you stay and would you help build this network? So I spent another several years building this thing called Serve LA, which was a conduit between by that point, 3,000 people that were very, faithful people, but more, even more so, wasn't about what we believed. It's about who we were for other people. So it was around service and around, helping people connect to God, quote unquote, in their own way. We didn't have like a big agenda, but inviting people into service. And I would tell people back then, hey, if you give me an hour of your week, I promise you it'll be your favorite hour of the week, because I'm going to give you an experience, set up an experience. As long as you show up, both physically and emotionally to it, your life's going to be changed. If you're, tutoring a homeless kid, or, helping a battered mom, or, all these list of opportunities, it's going to change your life if you come and get involved in it. So I love that. So I connected us, and this kind of started to solidify part of my probably unique gift to the world is I'm a connector naturally. So just building this relationship network, where there's 30,000 nonprofits in LA, but we've selected a few that were making a big difference, and we could come in and I could send, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. I mean, 2,000 people a year would go serve. And so building those networks and building leadership teams, and that's what got me into a more formal view of like training leaders. So always have to train volunteer leaders. A lot harder than training paid people. You actually have to do it, otherwise they're going to go away. So love that work. Out of that, I met a guy named Jeff.
Let me pause you for a second
go.
and just
Sure.
comment on one of the things you just said was service to others is so impactful for them, but also for you.
Oh
And
yeah.
you said, I promise you're gonna get more out of this than you put in, and
Right
that is
on.
so true.
Yeah.
And I've definitely learned that over my life. Is the more I serve others, the more I thrive.
Right on. Yeah. Even most people, if we connected to the business world, if you're just there to like get a paycheck, or just there to make sure you look good, you're going to feel empty, because no even accolades or amount of money is ever going to be enough to satisfy kind of the core human conversations, which are always about meaning and legacy and relationships. That's what matters most. We know that from all the research now on the people that are in their deathbed and hospice care. It's like what people regret is what didn't happen in the relationships. So conversely with that, if if you can, as a business leader, generate a whole conversation, the culture about me contributing to somebody else's success, people stay longer and people have more meaning in it. And there's much more, collaboration, not because you tell them they have to, because they want to give other people opportunities to succeed. And there's a whole, culture of celebration that happens naturally if we're here to catch people doing good instead of just doing the typical management stuff, which is like, if they're doing good, fine, we pay them for that. If they're doing bad, that's what I talk to them about. No, no, no. You need to celebrate what's working and point it out. And people don't, you don't end up generating a culture like of all these territories and looking for, like, as if praise is like this fixed pie. And if they win, or if they look like they won, then I don't get the credit. If you get a culture of credit, you got trouble. So
Beautiful. I love it. Probably
yeah.
leads a lot to a lot of your culture work as well.
Oh
Hey,
yeah,
I want to
for
ask
sure.
you, tell me about what your unlocking move might be. So something that really a decision point or a key decision that changed the trajectory of your career.
Yeah, well, there's lots of them. I'm thinking about, when I let's see, between when I worked at the church, which is a really fun gig. I mean, it was very meaningful, and I got opportunities to go, do stuff that I was at 25, till 30 at the time. Um, a big unlocking move is I took a gig right before it was right between me working at the church and me going out and doing this foundation, which with all the guys in prison. I actually took a gig to go be a nurse for 2 months with the brother-in-law of the king of Qatar. So I'm in the Middle East taking care of this member of Qatari royalty. And for the first time in my life, I was really alone. And I'd been around people forever and I like being around people. I'd always had a full schedule, and I got to really see myself. And I realized there's parts of myself that I was full of it. Like I wasn't who I thought I was when the lights weren't on me. Realized how much of a performer I had been. And I had to really come to grips with that. And I was literally in the desert, but metaphorically in the desert as well. It's like, who am I? Who am I really? Who am I now? I'm maybe I'm nobody. Like that kind of long night of the soul, which lasted for 2 months and quite frightening. That was I mean, I didn't step into that with foresight. Like, hey, I'm gonna go see and befriend my despair, which is actually what happened on that trip. But I didn't plan it. But in it, I came back really texturized and stepped into that next season of my life with a lot more heart and a lot more vigor than I ever had before. I think I've been I naturally had been performing in some ways, and some of that's good, but some of it's also was really empty for me. So I stepped into a season of really I was going to say self-care. I never use that term, but really wanting to be more self-aware than I ever had been, because I know was true for me then. With a lot of leaders, you end up um, taking care of other people, doing a thing, and not really paying attention to the uh, your own internal culture, like how you're really doing, and that really broke me down, which was a big gift to me. And I mean, that's part of the discipline. That's why I journal every morning now, just because I need to know how I'm doing. And I'm a guy that if I don't watch it, I don't ask myself how I'm doing for like a year. I don't even think about it because I'm just doing this thing. And here's what I'm very ambitious, but you'll end up creating plenty of habits that aren't healthy and feeling really alone. That's part of the whole, I think, imposter syndrome thing for people is, or like it's lonely at the top, that mantra that everybody's tied into these days. Well, it's lonely because we haven't let anybody up to the top with us, and there's like a secret. There are plenty of payoffs to being alone at the top because there's parts of yourself you don't want other people to see. So that really broke me open in brand new ways, and it's obviously been a bumpy road since then, ups and downs and all that. But I have the discipline of journaling every morning just because I know that I need to kind of get to know myself every day. It's like, there's 5 or 6 Adrians in here, and I don't know which one I'm going to wake up with, and I better like listen to how I'm really doing. Otherwise I'll live an empty existence.
Well, I like the journaling technique. That's a great ad for most of our listeners to
Yep.
even just a simple 5-minute journal. But what I
Yep.
heard about what you just said is powerful, and I want to touch on it. One, you were alone and you were left alone with your thoughts, and you could have filled that. You could have taken out any kind of entertainment or whatever you could have done to fill that void, but you used it for introspection, which is huge.
Yep.
And you took the leap or the path, the harder path, which was make a change from that and learn about yourself. And I think the deep work is what's led you to where you are now, and was your
Oh yeah.
unlocking move versus just checking Dodger scores back in the States, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's why now, when I'm in these conversations with very influential and powerful people, I want to be in a conversation with them that they wish they were in with themselves. And I can go there with them because there's no conversation too dangerous or too weird or too crazy or too or quote unquote wrong or too anything. Whatever they've got going on, I'll put my arms around it and we'll at least start there. There's some things we don't want to stay with, but at least no matter what, and they've got that feeling with me. They can say anything to me and it's cool. It's okay. Like, I'm not going to judge you. I tell them that and convince them of that over time. It's like, hey, I'm the most non-judgmental person in your world. Now, I'm also more committed than anybody in your world to where you say you want to go. So it's this weird paradox. So you could tell me anything, but we're definitely going there no matter what, right? Yeah. Okay, good. So let's get a hold of, a lot of people want to fantasize about the future, talk about the future because it's really fun and out there and it's, tons of dopamine in that conversation. But are we willing to and able to really have the skills to put language to current reality? That's what most leaders aren't as willing to be good at because it's more, vulnerable and, you have to slow down a little bit to do that. And most of them are really scared they're going to get off pace. And so to like do some reflection stuff, or even, I've got this leadership training called the Revenant Process, which is a 4-day personal leadership training that anybody can come to. It's public. And it's 4 days, a lot of time. Yeah, it is a lot of time. But if you could have some conversations in that room that will change everything, not only for you or your spouse, but also your kids and your grandkids. You can make some decisions in that room that changes your entire legacy. Why is that not worth it? So I get to invite them into those real conversations that I think our souls are always striving for growth. Our brains are striving for survival. We know that, but our souls want to grow. So I want to connect with that deeper conversation with people, which some don't want to have, and they just want to, collect things and look good and all that. That's fine. We don't usually work together, but I want to, make it count, make the conversations count, make our daily decisions count, make our relationships count. And that takes a certain type of rigor and discipline.
And takes deep work. And Adrian, that's beautiful. And one thing that I heard that you didn't quite say it this way, but it sounds like you take leaders where they don't really want to go, but they're probably glad they went.
Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah. They're always scared to death. You know, they're always scared to death, which is natural because it's unknown territory for them. And if you're a high-end leader, you've probably been exemplary most of your life. And so part of the game you've been playing, you wouldn't call it a game, but part of like what you call life and existence is trying to sustain the expectations you have of yourself or other people have of you. And so you can't fail or you can't, lose. You can't show your scars and talk about your fears and insecurities, although those show up all the time, but you can't like own them. And I just want people to own them. Like, hey, that's part of the hug the cactus conversation. Let's just be close to it, man. It's okay. You can be both really ambitious and impressive and really frightened and insecure. You are, by the way, but you can actually talk about it and it brings people closer to yourselves and rehumanizes you in front of other people. I think that's the style of leadership that's going to work in the future, especially as AI gets taken off and, computers continue to run the world. Like, it's leaders that lead from a human way without being so soft, which culture wants us to all be soft and all that. No, be rigorous with yourself. It's more of a stoic philosophy, I guess.
Well, I'll
But
tell
yeah,
you
get close to it.
what probably scares them, and I'll say what scares me and scares us is we do that deep work and we're not really that pleased with what we see. We don't really
Right
like
on.
the person that we see in the mirror, and
Right
that's a
on.
scary thing.
Yeah, well, it's scary because we don't have, I would just say, in this current time, we don't have a lot of examples. I'm getting ready to start a whole new show. Um, That's going to be called Fire in the Desert. This is the first time I've talked about it besides with my team. And the whole theme of this show is going to be, and it's going to be hosted on YouTube, is about this, is about, the ways in which impressive people self-destruct, and how do we reconstitute ourselves? How do we come back from the brink? How do we recover ourselves, recover relationships, recover projects, whatever you're doing? That's going to be the premise of the conversation. Hopefully, my point being is that we don't have a lot of examples of this. Anytime people talk about suffering or talk about mistakes, it's usually bumper sticker conversations. It's usually kind of, you know, what am I thinking? The silver lining type combos, but people don't go deep on, hold on, how did I know it was going to be this bad? When did I know that I was, creating mischief in my life or hurting someone else? And I did it anyway. Let's just talk about that, like explore how people make all these decisions that end up they paying a lot of price for, and other people pay the price for it. And so as I think we create more of a, well, we have to create language for it so that people can know the territory, so that they can recover hopefully sooner, so they make less mistakes and make less, tragic mistakes in particular. So there's not a lot of examples, is my point. That's like, so yeah, I've got this thing that I'm not proud of inside myself, and I don't talk to anybody about it. Maybe some therapist or something if it gets really bad, but I don't talk to anybody about it. So you just live in this kind of quiet despair. And I would just love for people to, get off of all that shame conversation and get into back to life.
We all have it, that's for sure. Hey,
Yep.
we're running low on time. I got one key question I want to ask you, and that is, tell me one question that no one ever asks you, and either you secretly wish they would, or you're kind of glad they don't.
Oh, what's a question that nobody ever asked me and I wish they would, but I'm kind of glad they don't? Interesting. Well, that's fun. Uh, Nobody ever asked me, what my own insecurities are.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah. Or even just, I would just even say, like, what's going on now? In this real season of life, I mean, I just left a marriage in last May, and reconstituting myself after that. It was my second marriage. So I stepped into that relationship with plenty of yellow flags, at least some red flags that I made okay. And I'm, as you can imagine, really optimistic, definitely do whatever it takes, type guy, and I'm in. And I really failed. I failed myself. I failed her. She's a great person. And I failed her because she didn't, I've got kids, and she didn't really want to be a mother to my kids. And there was all this conversation around being a stepmom and what that is and what's not being a mom. And I betrayed myself. No, I actually want to be with someone that loves my children like they are her own. And I dropped my bar on that for a handful of reasons. Obviously, there was some physical attraction there, and there was she's very successful, and there was some of that attraction that was there. And maybe I was a little bit unconscious to what was truly authentic for me. And anyway, point being here, it's like, okay, now I'm back out in the world and dating again, and taking it slowly with myself, because I'm like, man, I can talk myself into anything. And that's, I'm a pretty good salesman, and I can, part of what made me good at being a pastor guy or now running a business and bringing in a lot of work for our firm, I can also sell myself on anything. So I'm in this really interesting kind of, reconstitution kind of gray area of like, okay, who am I now? And how do I not be hard on myself, because that doesn't serve anybody, but learn from it and get the wisdom from it, and ask myself better questions and draw a lot more boundaries than I ever did before, and realize that I'm not for everyone, and definitely everybody's not for me. Or, so I've been like raising the bar for myself in the context of relationships.
Nice.
So that's one thing. That's one thing that comes to mind.
I love it. Thank you for sharing. I love the
Of course.
reflective nature of how you just answered that, and how you said, you didn't say this, but God, what are you teaching me? What am I need to learn here? How do I make myself a better person out of this? And how to make my next relationship better? Because the one
Yep.
common theme is it's you, right? You're
Right
there.
on.
And it's,
Right on.
I love how you took ownership of some of the downfall. Well, thank you for
Yeah.
sharing, Adrian. It's been a blast. Where else can we learn about Adrian Koehler or taking new ground?
Yeah. Well, you can go find me on Instagram like everyone else. Adrian.k is my Instagram handle. And if you have any questions, obviously just DM me there and we'll find a time to connect to listeners. Take New Ground is the company. If you want to know about this leadership deep dive, we've got 3 coming up called the Revenant Process. We just
Okay.
surveyed 2,000 people, recent grads, and 97% of them said it was one of the top 3 experiences of their life. So I co-train that with Dan Tacchini, who's I'd say the best in the world at these types of experiences. We got one coming up, and I forgot to ask when this is coming out. Anyway, just go to We Are Revenant, Revenant, wearerevenant.com. We've got one in Boise, one in LA, one in Honolulu, all coming up this year, and probably another one on the back end of that. So go check it out, and here to help.
Honolulu, let's go. Wearerevenant.com. Take New Ground and Adrian Koehler.
Yep, Adrian.k. Yep.
All right. Adrian, on that note, we're going to wrap this puppy up. Thank you so much for joining me on Unlocking Moves. I'll ask everybody to go out there and please give us a 5-star review. Go like and subscribe to the podcast, both on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you consume your podcasts. And thank you again, Adrian, for being with us. We will definitely be big fans of Take New Ground.
Awesome. Thanks, Kurt. Good to be here.
Yeah, you bet.
If you're an entrepreneur and you think you might have outgrown a member of your team, or maybe you've got a mic, as we talked about in Who's Your Mic, check out this quiz at who'syourmic.com/quiz. That's who'syourmic.com/quiz.